What is going on, YouTube? It is Primitive here, and today I'm going to be bringing you my Jesmon decklist profile that I've been working on recently. As with all the Jesmon lists coming around, I've been seeing a lot of decks that I feel like are a bit lower on consistency. I've been seeing a lot of Jesmon players complain about consistency, and when I've played against Jesmon players, I've seen a lot of bricking. So I wanted to try to build a Jesmon deck that was going to be less bricky, was going to have a better game plan, and was going to be able to get some more wins going on post-starter deck. Now, Jesmon did get a huge buff with the starter decks with the red memory boost. Being able to gain that 2 extra memory and have an extra way to gain memory outside of Tai Kamiya is actually very huge. It's going to be able to make it so you can Digivolve faster. It also makes it so that you can Digivolve on the same turn that you play Delicate Plan and Judgment of the Blade. And so all these things are very great. However, there were a lot of lists that I was testing and seeing that were really low on things like rookies, having really low ultimate counts, having a lot of option cards and tamers, making it so that you were going to have a lot of awkward hands and make it really hard for you to have a consistent game plan. So I've been playing a lot of games with this Jesmon list the past week to try to refine it, and so I want to bring it to you all here so you can start to refine this list yourself, change it how you would like. This is the list that I'm very happy with. It's been very good for me. It has a lot more consistency in being able to have the game plan that you need to win, especially versus decks like Bond of Friendship, which this deck can struggle against, but I will talk about that here in a little bit. Now, starting off with the Digitama, I did decide to start with the 4 Demi Marimon. The reason I like the Demi Marimon over something like Bebidamon or anything like that is because this card can support Digimon that aren't Jesmon, and with this list I started to focus more on swinging early game and having a more clean Jesmon end game instead of focusing on just going for a big Jesmon turn to win the game. And so being able to buff up your lower Digimon, such as your rookies and your champions, so that way they have a higher chance of surviving in security or swinging over opponents' blockers, swinging over suspended Digimon, all like that, it's going to be very impactful. And so I liked the 4 Demi Marimon here. And then the same thing with the Yokomon. The Yokomon is another Digimon that you could play the Bebidomon here if you wanted to, because it will support the Jesmon, but with how I've been playing the list, I don't focus as much as the Jesmon as I do the early and mid game, and so having these eggs made it so that I was going to have a more consistent boost on the Digimon that I needed, instead of just focusing on boosting up only my Jesmon. Now, getting into the rookies, let's go ahead and talk about the Huckmon here. Now, this card is the glue to the entire deck. If this Huckmon didn't exist, this deck would probably just be a tier 2 or tier 3 deck, because this Huckmon adds an incredible amount of consistency. Being able to search your top 5 and add 2 to your hand of whatever Huckmon, Jesmon, or Sistermon that you need is going to be very, very valuable. When you're playing such low counts on things like Savior Huckmon, which is a very important card to the Jesmon game plan, you need to be able to search those out as much as possible. So you need to be maxing out on this Huckmon. Not only is it going to work well with things like the Sistermon Blanc to give it blocker early, but it's also just going to be able to search out the cards that you need, and that's going to be very, very important for consistency. Now let's go ahead and talk about the Guilmons here. We are going to be having 3 of the starter deck Guilmon and 1 of the promo Guilmon. Now the starter deck Guilmon is going to be very good, because if you go up into your things like Bao Huckmon, or you go up to Savior and get the Bao Huckmon inheritable, you're going to be able to get extra draw. The draw is going to be very important with this deck. When I was building the deck, I was looking for really high draw consistency, being able to search and get the cards that you need without hindering anything else. This Guilmon was just the best card for it, because it works really well with the deck. We are playing the 1 Gallantmon, so you do have the opportunity to warp up with that Gallantmon with this Guilmon, but most importantly, just it does have a great inheritable of being able to draw. There are a lot of cards in this list that are going to allow you to delete your opponent's Digimon, so being able to draw is great. And then we have the 1 promo Guilmon for the very same reason. It is a draw card. With this list, I have been focusing very much on the rookies swinging in early, being able to get 2-3 checks very early before you go into the Jesmon, so you don't have to worry about hitting the perfect stack of Greymon into Savior Huckmon and going in for big swings. Now obviously that's very important for things like security control and 3 Musketeers, being able to have that delicate plan, go for 3 swings, unsuspend, go for 3 swings, go into Omnimon or whatever. Those things are going to be very good. That is a game plan that is a big part of Jesmon, and you have to work around that. But versus decks like Gabu Bond, Agu Bond, even the Mirror Match, I found that swinging in early with the rookies is going to be very important, getting those 2 to 3 checks in, so that way you don't have to worry about the consistency of hitting the Jesmon. There are way more rookies in this list than other lists, so the probability of you being able to get those 2 or 3 early checks in is very high, and you don't have to have the perfect stack to end with Jesmon. So the Guilmon here is going to be very good at just swinging in early and getting extra draws, which is going to go along with my whole game plan of drawing as much as possible. Next up is going to be 3 of the Agumon. Now there's nothing really crazy here. It just has a very good inheritable. Once again, it is able to buff up your Digimon 1k, just like the Demi Marimon and the Yokomon and stuff like that. So that way when you swing in with your earlier Digimon besides Jesmon, you are going to have the best chance of surviving or being able to swing over your opponent's Digimon. And I just like this inheritable a lot. I think the 3 of is fine. This is probably the least impactful rookie in my opinion, but but it is a card that is very good, especially versus decks like the Mirror Match, because being able to have that extra 1k and being able to, for example, swing your Bauhuckmon over your opponent's Bauhuckmon or things like that is going to be very important. It came up very often in the Mirror Match for me, and so I do like this Agumon a lot. And then to finish off the rookies, we are going to have 2 of the Monodramon. Now this can be any 2-drop really. I just really like the new art in the starter deck of this Monodramon, but the 2-drops have been very good here. Once again, like I said, I do value swinging in very early with the rookies, and when decks value swinging in early, the 2-drops are very nice because you can play it for cheap. In this metagame, giving your opponent 3 memory very early is kind of a detriment because there are so many things that cost 3 memory, such as Gabumons, Huckmons, or even just other Agumons, and so being able to put your opponent at 2 instead of 3, or be able to maybe choke them at 1 is going to also be very important. And so the flexibility of having a 2-drop rookie is very nice. They aren't so impactful that you have to max out on them. I just went ahead and put them as the 2 there because I wanted 2 more rookies, and they fit perfectly there. They don't really take anything away from the deck, and they just add a little bit of versatility. Now, before getting into the champions, I want to go ahead and talk about the Sistermons really quick. I'm going to start off with the 4 Sistermon Blanc. Now, a lot of decks are playing the 3 and 3, or they're playing 3 Blancs and 2 Seals, but the reason I went up in 4 here was, once again, because it says draw 1. It's very consistent. Not only are you going to be able to have the on-play draw 1, which is much more consistent than when attacking or when deleting one of your opponent's Digimon, but it's also a blocker when you have a Huckmon on the board. We have many Huckmons on the board, as well as Royal Knights, and so you're going to be able to have a Digimon that is a rookie that can swing in early if you need. It's going to be a draw source, it's going to be a blocker, and there's 3 different ways to get it out for free with the Savior Huck, the Jesmon, and the Judgment of the Blade if it comes out of security. So Sistermon Blanc was very consistent. It's very good. I do think it is a little bit awkward of a card just because it's a rookie that can't Digivolve on top of your Digitama, but since we are having 13 red rookies, you don't have to worry about that as much. That consistency was fixed up a bit, so playing the 4 here is fine. You can play these consistently, you can get as much draw as you want, and then when you start cycling them for free with the Jesmon later, it is very nice. And then we are playing the 3 Sistermon Seal. Nothing too crazy here. Sistermon Seal is just a card that is very good. When you get it off of Judgment of the Blade and security and being able to gain a memory, that is something that's very devastating. It's something that your opponent has to play around because they could just swing in, you can't just end their turn, but it does work really well with the strategy of swinging in early. When you have a Seal out, it's going to bounce up or buff up your Bauhuckmons and your Savior Huckmons, as well as your regular Huckmons, but the Champion Ultimate a little bit more impactful of a buff because you're going to be able to swing into security and have an actually good DP base to survive, and as well as being able to play it off of Jesmon, so that way you can gain a memory, and then if you are only at 3, that way you can Digivolve for 3, go to 0, and then you can swing, unsuspend with the Seal, gain a memory, and then if you want to play the Judgment of the Blade or the Delicate Plan from there, you can. So it's just a very good memory source. It is something that is a little bit less consistent than the red memory boost because you have to pay a little bit more memory, or you have to swing with your Jesmon first, or things like that, but it is a very good card, and if you can end your opponent's turn with it on Judgment of the Blade, it's very, very devastating. Now, getting into the champions, we have the 4 Bauhuck and the 4 Greymon. I don't think there's too much to say here. This is going to be very standard. The 4 Greymons are super important in your Jesmon stack. Being able to get the security attack +1 with the Savior Huckmon is essentially the stack, because then you can swing for multiple swings, unsuspend, and swing for more multiple swings, as where if you have the Bauhuckmon, obviously you can delete something that has 5k or less DP, but you're only going to be able to probably get 1 check unless you have the Voltramon, and then at that point you're not going to be able to unsuspend. So the Greymon is very important, but the Bauhuckmon is also important. It's going to be something that, like I said, you can swing in very early. You can also search it with Huckmon, so it's a consistency card, and overall I think these are very standard. And then we have the Agunimon here. This was a card that I was higher in count, but I decided to cut down. You don't really need it as much in this list as compared to like Gabubond, where the hybrids are very impactful. I'm only playing 3 Tamers, so the consistency isn't that high, and a lot of times you don't really want to Digivolve on top of your Tamer, but it is a nice little ender. It is like a pseudo Omnimon, but obviously you can't blitz, it has to still be on your turn, but it is a card where you can go in for all your swings, and then you can win with your Tamer, which is something that your opponent can't really play around as much because they can't get rid of your Tamer. So I decided to stick with the 1 Agunimon. This also ups the champion count. At 8 champions, it was something that sometimes you could whiff if you weren't hitting them off of your Huckmon, so having 1 extra champion there was going to up that consistency of Digivolving, as well as being something that can just be a quick attack and maybe go in for game, or something that's just a draw card, because there has been a couple times where I've needed to go Agunimon on top of Tai just to get the draw and then go in for the swing. But the 1 Agunimon is nice, but the hybrid is a little less impactful in this list than I've seen in other lists. Now, getting into the ultimates, we are going to be having the 4 Savior Huck and the 1 Voltramon. The 4 Savior Hucks are obviously very standard. This is the kind of key card in the matchup. If you don't have this underneath your Jesmon is just going to be a lot weaker because you want to be able to go for those multiple swings. You want to be able to play multiple Sistermons, as well as if you're playing the Judgment of the Blade, you want to be able to swing over multiple of your opponent's Digimon. So the Savior Huck one here is a 4 of. There's really no question about that. But then what are you going to do about the other ultimates? There isn't a lot of room to play a lot of other ultimates. I saw a lot of lists that were only playing the 4 Savior Huckmons as their ultimates as it was, and I just found that to not be very consistent. And so I was at one point playing 6 ultimates, but then once I started to switch my game plan to swinging in a little bit more early, I found the hitting your Savior Huckmons to be pretty consistent because we have the Huckmons and the red memory boost, but I still wanted one extra ultimate, and so I was in between the Voltramon and the Altruist mode Metal Greymon. I decided to go with the Voltramon just because if you do miss your Greymon, then being able to have the security attack +1 is going to be very good, be able to get multiple checks, and then you can go into Omnimon and get those checks as well. But the Altruist mode is a card that you can consider just because it does substitute as a Mega as well in a way as an ultimate, because you can Digivolve for 1 on top of your Savior, and if you have a Sistermon on board, you can unsuspend, but you can also get your tie boost if you have an egg on the stack, because you will have the 4 sources underneath, just like you would with a Jesmon, because you can Digivolve for 1 on top of your ultimates. So it does have like a pseudo Mega vibe to it while also being an ultimate. The inheritables are just not very good, and the when digivolving is never going to activate, which is what kind of strayed me away from it. But it is a card that I've been thinking about a lot. I think if you do like the Metal Greymon Altruist mode, you could definitely play it because it is very good. It's very consistent because it does substitute as both a level 5 and a level 6 in a way. So if you do enjoy that, you can definitely play it there. I don't think it's going to be too big of a difference, but for my testing, I decided to go with the Voltramon just because the security attack +1 is going to be very important in things like security control and 3 Musketeer. Then getting into the Megas, we are just going to have the standard 4 Jesmon. It is a Jesmon deck, so you're going to be playing 4 there, so you can have the highest consistency of finding it as possible. Again, I want to try to maximize the consistency of this deck, and so playing any less than 4 Jesmon just really wouldn't make any sense, but only playing the 4 Megas is something that I wasn't a big fan of. I did play a lot of Imperial Dramon in the past, and when you were just playing the 4 Imperial Dramon and no other Megas, it was a little bit inconsistent because there were times you really wanted to get a Mega on top of your ultimate, so we decided to go with the Gallantmon because it does have the security attack +1. It is able to delete some of your opponent's Digimon, but it also warps on top of the Guilmon, so it just has a lot of synergy with the deck already. So decided to go 4-1 here. There's not really anything else to say here. This is pretty standard. Some lists might play a 6th Mega, but I don't think there's too much room because we are playing the extra rookies. And then the 1 Blitz Omnimon. Now, this is a card that I was playing 2 of for a while, but once again, when you're playing the Agunimons and you're playing the multiple rookies, you don't really need to blitz as often. It's not going to be as important, and when you're only playing 5 Megas, the ability to hit the Blitz Omnimon does go down a little bit, and so I did find some times where I was having a couple in my hand or having one in my hand that I couldn't use, so I found it to be a good cut, so that way you could just have some extra room to fit in the other cards that we have in the list. And getting into the options, we do have the 2 Delicate Plan. Now, this was a card that for a while I was wanting to play at 3 because if you do bottom deck it with things like Huckmon or Red Memory Boost, you could be in a little bit of trouble, but when you're playing it at 3, it just became too clunky. If you have 2 Delicate Plans in hand, one of them is almost pretty much always going to be dead, so I found 2 to be okay. There is a lot of draw and a lot of search in this list, so you are going to be able to find your Delicate Plans a bit easier, and so I just decided to keep it as 2. And then the 3 Judgment of the Blade. Judgment of the Blade is very important because not only is it able to swing over your opponent's Digimon, but it is a security trigger that can get another Digimon on the board. So when you play this, you can play a Sistermon out, you can get the Blanc, which can draw you a card and become a blocker, which could potentially save you, or you could play the Seal out, which would make it so you gain a memory and you can end your opponent's turn. Now, this is something that you have to play around all the time. When you're playing things like Gabumon, you pretty much have to always sack off something like a Hammer Spark or Memory Boost to go above 0, so that way when you're swinging in, you don't hit a Judgment of the Blade and your opponent brings out a Seal. So the 3 Judgment of the Blade is a card that is good with consistency. It's not a dead card where if you have multiple in your hand, it's going to be something that you can't use, because you could just use it on something like a Bow Huck or a Savior Huck, swing over your opponent's Digimon that they have on board, clear the board, as well as start to develop, and then like I said, it is a great security trigger. And then we are going to be having 2 of the red memory boost. The red memory boost is the card that really gave a buff to this list. I was playing 3, but I opted to cut down to 2 to go to 3 tie, just because as much as the red memory boost searching is great, the ability for tie to give you the security attack +1 but also start your turn always at 3 is very good. The red memory boost is going to give you 2 memory once, as to where tie Kamiya is going to give you 2 memory consistently, because your opponent's going to want to put you at 1 memory on pretty much every single turn that they can. But once you have tie out, they're not going to be able to do that, because you're going to be able to go up to 3. So every turn that they would put you at 2, you are going to be essentially gaining 2 from tie that turn, because you'll go up to 3 no matter what. So the red memory boost does have the search, but the tie is a bit more of a consistent memory gain. So I decided to go with 2 red memory boost and 3 tie. And then to finish off the list, we just have the 3 tie like I was talking about. I pretty much just explained it. I was playing this at 2 and then 3 red memory boost, but I decided to up it because, one, it is a card that you don't really want to play from hand as often, so having a higher consistency of it being in your security and coming out for free is good. But also, it is just a card where it does fill out some memory curves. If your opponent's going to go to 3 with their memory tamer anyway, it's going to give you the extra attacks with your Jesmon, and it's also going to make it so that you just don't get choked. And getting choked with this deck is just way too brutal. If you let your opponent choke you, they're pretty much going to be able to win consistently, and that was something that was also happening to me quite a bit. So the 3 ties is something that I think you could potentially go down to 2 if you wanted, but it is a thing that if you do get choked for more than 2 or 3 turns in a row with this deck, you are going to be very, very far behind. So having the 3 for consistency is very good. 3 is a very good consistency number in Digimon in general. You'll see a lot of times in my deck list where I put 3 of a card in there, just because the difference between 3 and 4 with a lot of cards is not super big unless they are very key, like the Huckmon, for example. And that is going to be my Jesmon list. I hope you enjoyed. This is a list that I have been having much higher consistency with than seeing a lot of other lists that were playing like 10 rookies, for example. Being able to Digivolve on top of your Digitama, promote pretty much every single time you can, being able to swing in or build your stacks up is very, very important with this list. Jesmon is a deck that I'm sure we've all heard is very bricky, so with my goal of being an anti-brick Jesmon, I did find this list to be very effective in that. Obviously, if you do find some things that you want to change when you are testing this yourself, you can. I'm not going to say this is the best list, but is a list that is going to be a lot more consistent than some of the lists that we've been seeing online, just because of the weird ratios that they have on there. But if you enjoyed, be sure to like and subscribe, because I'm going to be having some more BT6 content with you. Hope you have a great day and happy holidays. Peace out.